quorum of any public body. And then, yeah, of course, in the next meeting you vote on it, but you've already consensed and kind of excluded the public from the discussion. The public should be part of the discussion as well as the action.
That's correct. Yeah. I think that one of the things I'll mention right off the bat so that I don't forget it, and Alexis is aware of this, is that we should record all these meetings. So if we're not recording them, I know Zoom and Google Meet has a way to do that. And if for any reason there's any problem with that through Zoom or Google Meet, we should at least do an audio recording. So if anyone from the public would request a recording, we have it. Yeah, and there was a lot of discussion in this meeting, interestingly enough, about whether this or that, needs to comply with Open Meetings Act, or whether, if you're not doing policy, you have to comply. I think the smart bet is we will just comply with the Open Meetings Act across the board, because whether or not, we don't want to be in a position where we're arguing a technicality. We don't want to have complaints from the public that we're discussing or deciding things that the public was not informed about. I think we should always default to complying with every requirement of the Open Meetings Act. That way, we're always in compliance no matter what happens. So that means recording, posting the minutes 10 days in advance, having at least a few bullet points on each item, and there will be things that we won't know that will come up in public comment, like Pat Lehan's, joining us today. Maybe she has something she wants to bring up later that's a concern with business people or with her neighborhood or something. We don't actually know what that is. So the public comment portion of the agenda should always be on there, but we don't always know 10 days in advance what that's going to entail unless someone contacts us in advance. So, but yeah, there's a lot of details. None of this is rocket science. It's pretty straightforward. And basically what we're doing is we want to do everything that we do in the spirit of openness and public involvement. We don't want to exclude anybody from these discussions or anything that we're doing. So, part of what we will be discussing today under old business touches on that, but I'll get to that later. So at this point, Lee, is there other things that we should bring up for the whole group that we learned?
I don't think as a group we've had any serious issues with OMA.
Yeah.
And, we're kind of proceeding with a new understanding, which is great. The only thing I would add, what a lot of people overlook about OMA is it's not the gold standard. It's the state legislator saying, if you don't comply with these minimum standards, it's illegal. We can always do better, is what I'm saying, than what OMA prescribes. We just have to be very careful we're not doing worse.
Yeah, exactly. In other words, we should always meet or exceed those standards for public openness and public involvement. I mean, we're all touching on the police department here. The last thing we want is AG to be coming after us. So, you know what I mean? I mean, that's I'm making a joke, but the main thing is we just want to conduct ourselves in a way that is proper and that is in the spirit of public involvement and openness. So, yeah, I think, Kimberly, you raised your hand.
Yes, thanks, Roy. I just wanted to share with you all that I emailed the agenda as it was posted on the city website, just to ensure that we're following it specifically as it was noticed to the public.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll get all this down. It's. I mean, starting with this meeting, we'll be doing everything totally properly. Not that we've been doing anything, as Lee just noted, that was actually improper, but we'll just make sure we comply with all the specifics of the requirements. In other words, if you post the agenda 11 days in advance, that's great, but we don't want to post it 9 days in advance, right? So, yeah, so thanks for this. Okay. And I see we're slightly out of sequence, which is okay with the agenda, but we'll finish up on new business and then we'll have guest introductions, which would be Pat Lehan. So as far as new business is concerned, I think we have some continuations to talk about from the last meeting, and what we'll do is in this meeting is we'll reference some of what we discussed last meeting, so it's on the record. But I think anything else from that Open Meetings Act training you think we should bring up?
There's nothing that really jumps out. We haven't had anything that was executive session business. That was huge for the city. That was not big for us because we haven't done it yet. But it's not enough to cite the exclusion from OMA on the agenda. For example, it's not enough to say limited personnel matters. Well, what kind of limited personnel matters about who?
Right.
We don't need to be privy to the actual discussion, but limited personnel matters could mean anything and frequently does. So
that's right.
We have to be careful, even though it's not real comfortable, to name the specifics about what's going to be discussed behind closed doors and verify when we come out what was discussed behind closed doors and take any action in the public view.
Right. Yeah. So I think what, Lee's sort of reiterating, which is very important, but again, if there is something like any kind of an executive session or emergency meeting or whatever, we have to be specific about what we're meeting about. And it doesn't have to be in massive detail. It just needs to be, it could be just be a single sentence as long as it's particular. Like, we are discussing bringing someone new onto this, onto this committee, for example. We'd name the name of the person we're discussing. So that would be specific enough. And again, if you think about it, that could just be one sentence, one bullet point under, executive session or something like that. But as Lee pointed out, anything that is decided or any substantive discussion needs to be shared with the public. So I think, basically what this comes down to is just timeliness and good open record keeping, actually. Making sure that anybody from the public can look at our agenda and understand what we plan to discuss and look at the minutes and see what we actually did discuss and what was decided. And if something comes up in the spur of the moment that doesn't fit within that 10-day window of the agenda or during the meeting itself, basically what we do is table it till the following meeting so the public has notice that we do intend to discuss it and potentially vote on it. So, again, we're just defaulting always to public involvement and openness. Okay, so that's OMA meeting. Alexis is in our minutes was the first item under, OMA training is the first item under new business. So I will ask at this point, does Chief, do you or anybody else on this call have other new business?
Not right up. The new business for what we have on our agenda, I think you see it there. I think we could just vote on that to go forward on it.
Yeah, just updates. Okay. Anyone else? And again, me asking that question right now is slightly unusual. We're not going to be doing this in the future. It'll be on the agenda, but since we're meeting, now's the time if you have something you want to bring up. Okay, so I think what we should do then is let's go ahead and before we go on to old business and updates, let's do our guest introductions. So we have, I see two guests, Pat Lehan and Gilbert. So let's start with Pat, if you can do a quick introduction.
Sure, I'm Pat Lehan with the Las Vegas Peace and Justice Center. And I did just have three quick things I wanted to point out as I was listening to you today. So I don't know if this is the time or if I should wait, but thank you for allowing me in. I appreciate it.
Roy, you're on mute.
Sorry. Yeah, as far as specific items, let's wait till we get past Gilbert's introduction as well. So Gilbert, if you can give a quick introduction.
Gilbert, you're also on mute.
Gilbert's our YouTube. He works for the city. He's our YouTube monitor, and because this meeting has to go on YouTube and on Zoom, so he's managing those.
Okay.
Okay. So he'll be pretty much a silent partner for this.
Correct.
Okay, and just one quick thing here before we move on. Okay, so we're starting to do live streaming on the city's YouTube channel. So that's why Gilbert is here. And it's airing now, so you are live on TV. Thank you, Pat. Appreciate that. So let's move on then. We have next item of business is presentation of certificates to board members.
So I asked the council and the city manager and mayor I wanted to present you with our certificate of appreciation and appointment, just to thank you guys for being saying yes to our board and saying yes to being on this, because I know it takes a lot of time out of your work day and you're working. So we just got a little token for appreciation for everybody, and so it just says certificate of appointment. I don't know if you can see it. You guys, okay, sorry.
Oh,
They'll say certificate of appointment, and then Dr. Kimblea, and then it has everybody's police advisory board. And I just wanted to present you with this. Be nice to present it in person, but maybe you can stop by and pick it up, or we can, mail it to you, or however you want to do that.
Okay, very nice. Yeah, thank you.
thank you.
With that fact is, we also want to invite you to come and use our Milo system. It's up and running, and we just invite. I did invite council, and council is very busy, so they haven't showed up. But I'd like to schedule a date for you, for my board to come in and use the Milo system and see what our officers go through every day on a daily basis on different scenarios. So that is up and running. But so, just a token of our appreciation for saying yes to working with me on this, and a lot of knowledge that I'm learning from you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was very thoughtful, actually. We appreciate that. I'll probably try to swing by and pick up my certificate.
So I have to confess to total ignorance. What is the Milo system?
So it's a multifunction. Multifunction. It's a big word. I'm sorry. It's like a video game type, virtual video game that you come in and we suit you up with all the equipment that an officer uses, and you go through you go through scenarios, virtual scenarios on what officers come in contact with on a daily basis. You might come into contact with an irate person out in the public. You might come into contact with a traffic stop, and this person might be compliant or non-compliant, or something else might happen. So just different answering calls to domestic violence, where you might have a domestic violence in progress, and things are turning rapidly every day. So I think it would be good to see our board come and see what our officers go through every day. It's a training. It's a piece of equipment for training. Like I'm telling everybody, is we're fighting 21st century crime with 21st century tools. We're getting out of the antiquated part of crime, of fighting crime. We used to fight crime antiquated. That goes to also our in-car computers. all our docking stations, everything is ready to go for our computers now. We're just waiting on some infrastructure from the Tyler system to tie in for VPNs and everything, where we'll be able to work directly and just open up more things for our officers, ease of work for them. So we're moving into the 21st century of policing. We've been antiquated for so long that now we've been able to, and some of this money comes from CARES Act money that we got. I don't know if you've seen on the legislative side, ICIP, I asked for $350,000 for new vehicles. Right now, we're about at 185,000 that we'll be receiving. So we're hoping for a little more. I don't know on the Senate side, but that was on the House side. So we're doing kind of good on, and I appreciate it from all our representatives but so we're moving in the right direction for our police department, and I hope our citizens see that. But I do invite you to come and try out our Milo system. I do want to, once we go green or turquoise or bring in people a little bit at a time to try this tool that we have out.
Yeah, that sounds great. I'd be very interested in doing that. I'm sure others will as well. Real quick, again, for purposes of public information, can you describe what the Tyler system is?
So our Tyler system is the whole computer system and infrastructure that the city of Las Vegas operates on. So it's for the whole city of Las Vegas. It's the system. It's called Tyler. Okay.
Yeah. Great.
I'm not a computer savvy guy, so all I got to say is that's how we operate. City of Las Vegas operates on Tyler.
Actually, a lot of municipalities throughout the United States, Tyler Technologies out of Tyler, Texas, is huge, and they provide like an integrated service. So everything, you pay your utility bills online now. You don't know, but you're actually paying your city utility bills through a website front end for Tyler Technologies. You're putting your cash right on your receivables in Tyler's accounts receivable module. It's a great system.
Yeah, Tyler came in, I think in 2011. So we've had that. Might have been a little earlier. I don't remember though. We've had Tyler around for a very long time.
Okay, very good. So as far as the Milo system goes, I guess we have to wait. Do you have a requirement for whether we're green as a county, and then do we just make an appointment, or how does that work?
As far as our board, we'll receive you anytime. It takes a little bit to set it up because we don't have a big training facility. But if you say you want to come in on Monday or Tuesday, and 3 of you want to come in on that day at whatever time, we'll set it up and you can go through the scenarios. All we do is check your temperature, make sure, or even if you're, just COVID safe practices, wear a mask. Most of us have our immunizations already, I believe. But, we still practice that safe practice here in reference to COVID safety.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And I would like if 3 or 4 or all of you come on one day, it's easier for us to set it up and go through everything. So, as a board, maybe you make a decision and say, yeah, we'll come on this day.
Okay, that sounds great. Thank you very much. Okay, so I guess unless there's anything else, Chief, we can move on to the next item of business.
No, that's it for me.
Okay, good. So the next item is update in progress on the survey. And again, maybe for public information, we could just quickly describe what the survey is, and then talk about updates. So Lee, do you want to talk about the survey? Do you want me to introduce that concept first, and then we can discuss any updates?
Well, sure. The survey is, I'd frame it as a customer satisfaction survey.
Mhm.
It's surveying the residents of Las Vegas, New Mexico, to determine what their perceptions of the LVPD are and what issues they may have at this point. It does include it doesn't identify respondents, but it does capture some demographic information so that we can look at the results and say, well, wow, we have an issue with a skateboarding generation, or one specific ethnic group feels particularly aggrieved, that kind of thing. And we're looking at doing it through multiple avenues. You know, this is, some people are the smartphone generation, some people like me, you know, working on a desktop makes you an old fuddy-duddy these days, which is interesting. And then we have, for a variety of reasons, people in our community who don't have any access whatsoever to the virtual world. So we're going to be distributing this in hard copy as well.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you, Lee. Yeah, in fact, on the hard copy side, we did talk about possibly putting this out through various means to the city. So maybe we can talk about that in more detail. And there was also an issue that we were discussing that had to do with, is there a cutoff age for people taking the survey? In other words, can teenagers take it or not? So why don't we talk about those topics one at a time, because that does fall into the category of updates. So I think, Dr. Blay, you were going to look into, what age groups could possibly take the survey without running into any kind of issues. Were you able to find out anything?
Well, usually what is permitted is anybody over the age of 18, anybody under the age would need parental consent to take the survey. And that's just standard institutional review board criteria in when you're doing research affiliated with a university and best practices. And so it would need to be only people over the age of 18.
Okay, so that's what we'll go with for now, unless something changes. I know that we are also talking about means of distributing paper copies of the survey. So were there any new updates on that? I think we're looking at, we're talking about a variety of things, including utility bills, et cetera. Are there any updates on that topic?
Yes. I spoke with Virginia Marujo actually this morning, and she did not believe that the city currently has the software in place to take a hard copy form and scan it and import the data into a database. Now, I did do some Googling, and that kind of software obviously does exist. I need to work with the city and explore further if it's something we can obtain for a reasonable price. And, you know, given the scale of what we're doing, is it actually going to be a super gain to use that rather than inputting manually? My guess would be if it's going to be over a few hundred hard copy responses, it'd be worthwhile to acquire the software, do the setup work, and make it work that way. You eliminate a lot of error by doing that. Virginia did say that she's more than happy to make the survey available both via social media and website through the city's tourism website, and to make sure that that's apples to apples, so that at the end we can combine the data from those two sources and have it be coherent and jibe.
Okay. If we do this through the tourism website, we'll have to make sure that the people who are responding are actually citizens of the municipality of Las Vegas and not just random people from wherever. So we'll have to figure out a way to do that. I think as far as the optical character recognition aspect of this, what we can do is physically design the paper survey so that it can easily be read by that software. And if we don't get a large volume of surveys and we decide to just do it manually, it'll still be totally workable. So that way we can prepare for that eventuality if we need it. And but if we don't, the surveys will still be very clear and easy for any human looking at it to interpret and input the data manually.
Right. What I do know is that the city's copiers, the Xeroxes, are really nicely high tech, and they already copy to PDFs. So then our job becomes importation from PDF to database, and there's software out there that does that. I just need to dig a little further on it.
Yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead, Kim.
No, I was just going to say, Lee, part of it too is really what is the most appropriate software to use, and kind of what would we want to use that software for, right? Is it, and how in depth do we want to get with analysis? So for example, we can use SurveyMonkey, in which you pay a specified amount, and it gives, it's not too much, and it gives you the ability to do some real basic analysis, like report in a way like X number of respondents or this percentage of respondents said this. Where another example of a software system is SPSS. And with SPSS, you enter in the data, but then it permits you to do like logistical regression models. And I don't think we want to go that far, to identify like correlations between different things that people are saying in the survey. I think as an initial step, we'd want to start with something more basic and just be able to capture data and identify trends just based on what people are saying, like numerical. Right. That's my recommendation. So I think SurveyMonkey might give us the capacity to do that. I believe Google also has some like analytical capabilities as well. I just am not as familiar with Google.
Right. My thought was that we're going to have, if we did it that way, we're going to have hard copy contributing data. We're going to have social media contributing data. We're going to have a website, probably SurveyMonkey on a website contributing data, and it all needs to jibe and it all needs to come together in one form or fashion in the same database, whether it be MySQL or Access or, some other format. And, it needs to be set up so that we can query it and still get apples to apples. I'm, not a statistician, so I don't know that we'd be looking at data regression, but, we do have to have it in a form so that we can ask basic questions and query it and get answers we have faith in.
Yeah, I think Dr. Blaze's recommendation is a good one. If we keep it simple this first time around, because we want to repeat the survey periodically so we can see how police, perception of the police changes over time based on what our police department is doing. So keeping it simple will be helpful. I think SurveyMonkey is a good way to go, and I think that there's enough analytical tools in SurveyMonkey to do the kinds of querying that you're talking about, Lee. And I think that anything that's posted on social media will be one click away from the SurveyMonkey actual survey. So it's not like we'll have a separately hosted thing on Facebook or anywhere else. It's just, it'll link to our SurveyMonkey survey. And the good thing is that SurveyMonkey actually works on smartphones. So anybody who lives their life on their iPhone or whatever, their Android device, can actually do the survey on their phone. They don't have to go to a website. So that way it's very flexible. And I think after this first survey, we'll see if we're getting enough interesting information back. And of course, the chief and his team will look at all this as well. And we might decide, well, it would be great to drill down a little bit more on this particular topic. So the next time we do the survey, we can split out some questions that go deeper into certain areas if it looks like that's an area that we want to explore further. But I think doing it in SurveyMonkey is great. And if let's say that we have a small amount of paper returns, like 12 of them or 20 of them, the other way to do it is to archive those as PDFs or, and then in some other fashion, and then manually input that into SurveyMonkey, because SurveyMonkey already has all, rather than trying to put it directly into a database, which would be, then we'll need somebody who has experience doing that. So we can also use SurveyMonkey as an input for whoever on our team is doing the manual input. But we'll also have the original PDFs that we can keep as documentation. So if anybody in the community wants to look at those, we'll have them available. Again, in the spirit of maximum public openness. Let's see, other any findings or other input on the survey at this point? I know that we had, again, since this is being recorded and televised, I should say broadcast, since we had talked about the actual survey questions, maybe just for public input, Lee, you can just talk about some of the sources that you found that we will model our questions on.
Well, I think we looked at more than a couple, but there was one that was developed by the Department of Justice.
Right.
That's uniform, and I would think the gold standard for assessing how a police force is doing with opinion in the community, and that's, I think, what we agreed to go with.
Yeah, no, yeah, that is what I remember. So again, for the public purposes, we're doing a survey. We will be starting with standard questions that come up from a police evaluation from the Department of Justice. We did look at that, and it did seem to cover pretty much everything we want to cover. We may alter the wording slightly based on things that our city and our chief and our police department may want to know specifically. In other words, we may add a question or two or delete questions, but it is based on a Department of Justice survey, which is used by police departments all over the country. So I think, unless I'm forgetting anything, those were the primary items that we needed to look at and talk about today, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
I just have one question, and I know I kind of threw the idea around last time. But a question that I have is, what is a realistic sample size? How many surveys are we aiming towards collecting? Like I said, 20% of a population is usually considered a good survey response. So what would 20% of the population of the Las Vegas municipality entail? Because I think that will also determine the amount of time that we will keep the survey up for.
So I think this new census, I think, came out with 14,000, I believe. I have background noise, sorry. I think it's 14,000 right now, so 20% of 14,000.
Yeah, just under 3,000. Yeah.
So give or take, I mean, we're answering about 1,500 calls for service a day, a month. So, I think if we went to 3,000, that would be a realistic goal.
Okay.
I was going to ask you, Mr. Reiner, did Virginia say if she could put this survey on My Civic 311?
Your microphone's off, Lee.
She did not address that, and I didn't think to ask. My apologies. But I certainly can ask. In terms of population, if we're going with 20%, that would be 20% of the population over 18, or I should say 18 and over in Las Vegas, right?
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
And let's see, we have about 13.3K people. I don't know how many of them are 18 and over, but that's something else I can look into.
Okay, yeah, I think if we can put it on the Las Vegas 311, that would be a great additional avenue to get it out there. One thing I should point out, again, for public information, since this is being broadcast, everyone who takes the survey itself is anonymous. So it's not like you sign up for the survey and you have to put in your name and address and all that stuff. It's anonymous, but we're just really looking for the public's view on the police department and the police activities, so that the department itself can make changes, make improvements, and over time we'll repeat the survey to see how those changes are impacting what the public is experiencing and public perception and so on. And we'll just keep making improvements. I mean, we'll probably do this, I don't know, maybe quarterly or something like that. We haven't decided that yet. That's not a decision. But that's just something we talked about, repeating it so that we can actually track how these changes are improving police community relations in the city of Las Vegas. Now, a couple of things that I might recommend, because to comply with the Open Meetings Act, what we should do is actually post the actual survey questions that are developed out of this Department of Justice survey online, along with the next agenda, so people can see it and give input. And then, so we should defer voting on the actual survey itself, as well as certain specific issues like timing that Kimberly brought up, until next meeting. But I think if we start with the survey itself, we can get public input, and then we can actually vote on it, on approving the survey language itself next meeting. And then as far as the timing, like how long do we keep it up? What avenues do we use? We can also vote on that next meeting. So I think any of those sorts of details we should really resolve in the next in the next 20 days, so we can post it online with the agenda ahead of time, 10 days ahead, and go from there. Because we probably will get some public feedback, and we can make alterations and that sort of thing before we vote. Any thoughts on that? Okay.
That sounds, I was gonna say, that sounds good to me. I'm typing all of this information up. So we also, based off of my previous notes from the last meeting, that way we have, and I'm calling it a data collection protocol, but that way we have that, that will be in addition to the survey. So that way we can be able to provide that notice to the public with exactly what we're intending to do with it.
That's fantastic. Thank you. Thank you for that. Okay, so let's move on then. No vote was taken on that topic. No action taken yet. Let's move on to the update on our mission statement and compliance with city charter. Now, some of this was actually peripherally came up on the call with the Attorney General's office regarding Open Meetings Act. And that had to do with questions surrounding, if we're a group that is formed by the governing body, for the governing body, what do we have to comply with? And one of the things that came up with is we do have to comply with the Open Meetings Act, or what we referred to as OMA earlier. But I think that part of the issue that we're looking at is that we don't actually have an official mission statement yet. I should mention that under previous police administrations, we did put one together that was pretty simple and straightforward. It wasn't super detailed, and but ultimately, the city governing body itself is supposed to tell us what our mission is. But as I brought up last month, I think it's a good idea for us to draft something, since we are actually on the police commission, and some of us have been doing this for some time, that basically talks about what we have done in the past, so that our current city council can look at it and say, okay, well, that sounds good, or we want you to do more, or we want you to do less, don't stop doing this, or whatever, so we can get to some clarification. Now, in order to do that, there's 2 votes involved. We need to create a draft that we, as a commission, agree to present to the city council, and then the city council has to vote to approve or modify, alter or disapprove that draft, and then we just keep cycling until we get to something that everybody agrees on. So I think that, again, since we just came out of the Open Meetings Act training, what we should do is, I had actually provided a draft to the commission earlier, but what we should do is just talk about that draft a little bit on this call, revise it based on our discussion today, put it in writing, add that to the agenda when we post it 20 days from now, so the public can look at it and have input, and then vote next meeting to approve our draft before we submit it to the governing body, and then they can do with it what they will. And that way, the public is included in this discussion, and any input can be taken in before we actually submit it to the governing body. So, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Lee.
So on the last the bylaws right now, rules and procedures of bylaws, we do have a mission statement and a purpose, but I know you want to change that. I think we're looking at changing that to better fit, because its mission statement and purpose is: the function of the commission shall be to serve at the pleasure of the governing body and shall assume whatever specific tasks are assigned to the commission by the governing body. And then, in order that the function, duties, and responsibilities of the Police Advisory Commission are carried out in an orderly, consistent fashion with full public knowledge of the procedures involved, the following bylaws and rules of procedures are adopted. So we do have rules and procedures that are adopted, but I think, did we email you these bylaws?
Sorry, I don't have a copy of the specific bylaws that you're referencing. And did anybody else receive those? So no, we should.
So we'll make sure we'll get you these bylaws, and then maybe next meeting we can come back and say we want to change some of these, just for better clarification on what the duties are of this commission. I know some were thinking that we were coming in, a commission was coming in to make laws and oversee the department as a whole, and that's not what the commission is going to be. Commission and board, right? Commissions are for making laws and making decisions, and the board is to take these decisions to the council and have them vote on it. So, we really got to look at what we really want to be. So that's why we were looking at changing the name also to the Police Advisory, possibly Police Advisory Committee. I don't know. We have to look at that.
Right. Yeah. Again, for public information, there's a couple of things I was going to mention about this discussion. First of all, when you email that information around to all of us, Chief, I just admonish everybody on this commission not to reply not to comment on it. Just think about it. Do not talk to each other about it, because we don't want to risk unwittingly creating what's known as a rolling quorum. So in between now and the next meeting, we can receive this information and review it so that we know what we're talking about at the next meeting, but do not comment on it. Do not call each other and talk about it between this meeting and the next one. It's really for just informational purposes for review for the next meeting. And then what we'll do is at the next meeting, as we discuss it, if we modify that language or add to it or subtract whatever, we'll discuss that openly on the call, on this meeting. So that anybody from the public can see the precise wording that we're discussing or any precise changes we're making. So that was the first thing. That's kind of an admonishment. But the other thing I was going to mention is that one of the things that I brought up in the early draft, and I think Keith had a little question about this, although I was actually stating that we do not do this. And that is that I mentioned that I don't think that we are an investigative body with any sort of investigative or policy-making capabilities at all. And the reason I think that is that, again, this is for public information. We talked about this already, but two reasons. One, the Las Vegas Police Department is an accredited police agency that follows accepted police policy that is a multi-agent police policy, and they conform to it and are accredited that they are following those policies. So it's not actually our job to create any police policy, first of all. Secondly, I think we are not an investigative body. And by that, I contrast, because I also spent time on the police, firefighters, and city employees union board. I was on that board for 3 years, and actually we didn't do that much on that board, but that board did have investigative authority. We could subpoena people. We could conduct an independent investigation, but the outcome of that investigation would have just been a recommendation to the governing board. But that union board did have investigative authority. I don't think that this board does. And thirdly, I think also I agree with a comment that Mr. Whiteman made, that we're also not a police oversight board, kind of like the APD has an oversight board that was implemented by the U.S. Department of Justice. We're not that either. So I think that we're probably closer to really, in other words, basically I think what we do is, and I'm just going to say this, we assist the police department as a liaison between the police department and the public. So if the public has concerns, we can help bring them up here, or a public member like Pat Lehan can show up herself and bring up her concerns. I just know that a lot of people are reluctant to directly engage with the police department, any police department. Nothing has to do with this police department. And I don't know why, but I know in the past I've served a lot as kind of a community liaison to help encourage people to file police reports or to complain or do whatever they need to do. So that's one role I know that we do have. Another role that I think we can have is, for example, in the case of the survey, we can assist the police department in getting formally getting input from the citizens through things like surveys. Now we're just assisting. It's actually a police department initiative. We're just assisting the department. We're not originating the survey. So I think we can assist the department in those ways. And I think that thirdly, if there's something that the governing body requests from us, like they have done in the past, and we have complied with that request, to maybe look at an incident that might be kind of controversial or something, and just offer our opinion. It's just an opinion. It's not policy or anything like that. I think that this board is also suited to do that. Okay, so again, it has no policy implications. It's not investigative. It's just an opinion. And again, as I mentioned before, a lot of these boards, commissions, committees, they are designed to be third-party kind of viewpoints that help the governing body, because they're not out there. I mean, they have their own official role. They go to city council meetings, etc. But and people do contact directly city council members. But I think that we're a little bit of an independent body. And again, as I said in the last meeting, what I mean by that is we're not employees of the Las Vegas, city of Las Vegas. We're not employees of the police department. So we are technically independent, even though we were created at the request of the governing body. And we're created at the request of the governing body because sometimes it's helpful for them to have an independent opinion. So anyway, go ahead, Lee.
Well, we weren't created by the governing body.
Well, I mean,
is the first thing that I would say. We were created by the city charter, which was voted on by the qualified electors of the city of Las Vegas. So that's the authority that the city charter has. That emanates from the people of this community. And the city charter establishes with a broad brush the Police Advisory Commission. But when I say with a broad brush, as regulation frequently promulgates. They said this is the broad brush, and the city council is tasked with establishing by ordinance the powers, and I'm going to quote, the powers and duties of the commission, which shall act as an advisory in an advisory capacity to the governing body regarding police policies and procedures, complaints regarding police activity that have been received by the city, and such other matters as the governing body may determine. And that second step never occurred. Everybody on this call, including guests, as individuals, or if we consensus on it, the board itself, it has the right and the freedom to go to the governing body and say, this is what we think it should look like. But irrespective of all of that, it is incumbent on the governing body to do what they're instructed by the city charter, which is to establish by ordinance the powers and duties of this commission within the constraints of the language of the city charter.
Yes.
That's all I'm saying. And, I wish the other shoe would drop. It'd give us a lot of clarity if they would do that.
Yeah, you know what? You're 100% right, Lee. And I think that part of the issue that we're having is that we don't have that specific directive. So I think that the discussion was that if we just put together a draft of what we think we have been doing, which I know the city is aware of because, the city, does get, some of our opinions and recommendations, and they have in the past, then they could say, yeah, that makes total sense. That's what we should do. Because I think that in the absence of a draft saying we're on the ground, this is what we've actually done, this is what we're doing, this is what we can do, say yes or no, cut things out, add things, whatever. In the absence of that, we might be sitting here for a while without any direction. So,
well, we've been going for 11 years with this charter, and we've had that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it'd be nice to get to that point. And but I just think that a draft would help the governing body get there, because they don't sit in on these meetings all the time, and they're super busy with all the things that they're dealing with. And so I think if we just said, this is what we actually have been doing on the ground, you want us to continue to do this, you want us to do something else, and they can just say yes, no, cut this out, whatever. And it's up to them. And you're right, we don't actually make or vote on policy, but if it has something to do with city policies, not actual police agency policies, then we can make recommendations and they can vote within their own authority to change this or change that, or to, I think the other thing is that, the police department has certain needs that need to be brought to the attention of the governing body, right? And some of this is from the state, some of it's local, like new police cars, new computers, new, this Milo training system, all of this stuff has to be elevated. And I know that the leadership of this department does attend city council meetings and brings these things up. But I think, again, as an independent body, we can kind of just give our opinion. We think this is a good use of the money or not a good use or whatever that is. And again, I think that's helpful to the governing body because they have 10,000 things that they have to think about and make decisions on, and they're busy. So in any case, but as far as process, I think that if Chief, if you can send out that bit of language you have, we'll look at it. We will not discuss it between now and the next meeting. We can discuss it at the next meeting, and then we can just make a decision, and we can have a vote here about what we present, if anything, to the city council. And we may just decide the only thing we present is a request for their determination without any background notes at all. But I just think, personally, I think background notes would be very, very helpful to the city council.
And these are the bylaws and rules of procedure. So I'm assuming the charter, I know it's being worked on now, and I don't know if that part of the charter is being worked on by the charter commission. They're reviewing it now, and if you heard on the council last night, they said that they didn't want to review the whole charter, just different sections that the city council believed needed to be reviewed. So if I got that correctly, that's what I got out of the meeting on that part for the commission. So I think that on our part, these are the bylaws and rules procedures, and if we want to change those to fit us, but also the charter part, I guess, I don't know, do you have a copy of that, Lee Einer, Mr. Einer?
When you say that, are you talking about the charter?
Yeah, the charter police section part of the committees.
Yes, I posted it up in the chat here just a few minutes ago.
Okay, thank you.
So it's section 605, and it's not a lot. I can read it if you like.
I think for
The
the
Police
public,
Advisory Commission. Come to think of it, I did read it. I'm not going to bore you again.
okay, if you already read it, that's fine. But is it true that the sections that the city wants to adjust on the charter, will they impact this particular commission? Do you know?
I cannot in any way answer that. It would be like asking you personally what the Police Advisory Board is going to be doing in 6 months, right? How are you going to know? I'm one person. What we plan to do is we will be looking section by section, but we're not going to be proposing changes to every section because that's not the job of the Charter Commission. The one thing we did review is that section of the charter that created the Charter Commission, because if you don't do that, you don't know your job, and then what in the hell are you even doing there? And what we are tasked with doing is reviewing the charter and making recommendations to the governing body for amendments to the existing Constitution, not we're coming up with a new one. That's outside the scope of our powers and duties, right?
But they didn't define specific sections that you're supposed to work on. They just said review the whole thing and let us know if there are sections that might be updated.
Okay, I don't believe they even said review the whole thing, but I think that's within the scope of our powers and duties, is to at least read it.
I guess the question that I have then is, should we wait on this? Should we table this until the charter has been reviewed and any amendments made, or unless you can tell us next month or 2 months from now that the section having to do with the Police Advisory Commission is not going to be altered?
So, Roy, I would say two things. And the first thing that I would say is that in the present time, the city charter stands with relation to city government as the U.S. Constitution stands with respect to federal government. It's the law of the land. In terms of any change, the process that is laid out is that the Charter Commission will make recommendations to the governing body for amendments that may be placed on the next ballot, the next regular election ballot. We're probably not going to make it for this electoral cycle. And, we've gone 11 years now, so we'll roll into the 12th is what I would expect. And then the governing body may or may not place those amendments on the ballot for the people, the qualified electors of the city of Las Vegas to decide. So it's not instant pudding. Not by a long shot. Any change that's going to happen is probably going to happen 2 years from now. And in the interim, we have the existing charter, which again is like our Constitution and our Bill of Rights, that we, and I don't just mean we, the Police Advisory Commission, we, the city of Las Vegas as a political entity, as a governmental institution, really need to conform to, because it's the document that creates the city of Las Vegas. And if we're not compliant with it, what are we? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. And of course, we don't want to wait for an interminable period to be able to do anything, as far as what we're doing. So let's start with the language of the city, with the city charter that you just cited, and then also start with the bylaws that Chief referred to. Let's start there and look at those things and discuss them next week, because what I'd like to do is to end up in a situation where we can actually start to be effective and actually do some things sooner rather than later. And so, and I think that it's not like this police advisory thing was just created like a week ago. I mean, this has been an operation for some time in various forms. So I think that, and we have provided some value to the police department and to the city over time. So I think what I'd like to do is to figure out a way, even if we just start with all the existing language and we don't change anything, a way to make sure that we can actually contribute something to the citizens of Las Vegas, to the city, the governing body of the city, and also to the police department sooner rather than later. Otherwise, we're just going to be having meeting after meeting and not actually being able to do anything. So, and I think the things we're talking about doing are pretty straightforward, helping the police department with their survey, doing some research on how best to do that. Again, being a liaison for community complaints, et cetera. And I'll just say, in the area of community complaints, I know that because I've been involved with the police department for some time, I get a lot of complaints. And I ask people, why don't you report these to the police? And they go, oh, I don't want to go in there. I'm just like, so I kind of naturally act as a liaison anyway. And I think that helps the police department, because if they don't know what the complaints are against the police, they can't do anything. And if they don't know what the issues are in neighborhoods, they can't do anything either. So I think that kind of open dialogue is really important. So at the very least, I would like to be able to function in that way for the citizens and for the police department and ultimately for the city.
Can I make a proposal?
Yes.
To be placed on the next agenda for a vote. In the city charter, the last line is one of those things that if you're an employee and you're reading your job description, you dread, right?
Yeah, it is.
And such other matters as the governing body may determine, which means we can do anything up to and including showing up and washing the police cars, if that's what the governing body determines.
Right.
But I would suggest we come to them with what ideas we have, but also convey to them with all possible urgency that until they do what they need to do, we can't do what we need to do, and we need to do what we need to do.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. Dr. Blay, Joseph, Mary Helen, does anybody else have any thoughts on that? I agree with Lee. I mean, that's basically what I'm trying to encourage is a little bit of, to raise this as an important issue that should be authorized by the city so we actually can do what we need to do. Are there any thoughts on that? Joseph, you raise your hand.
I did not raise my hand. I was resting my head, but
okay.
I agree with that. It sounds reasonable.
Okay. So, unless there's any objections to that, I think we should just proceed on that basis. And we'll circulate these two pieces of language that are already existing in city documents. Think about it, not discuss it, come back next meeting, we'll discuss it and decide at that meeting. We'll discuss it in some detail and say, well, do we all also want to specify this and that? I mean, one of the things about legal, especially governmental documents is that they're sort of vague for a reason. But I think that a little tiny bit of specificity would be helpful to us so that we don't feel like we're just overstepping our bounds or doing things that the city may not want. Plus, I think it helps clarify for the city what value we can be to the city and to the governing body and to the citizens and the police department. So let's go on that basis. We'll go with what Lee just said. What Lee just said, and we'll come back and discuss this in more detail next week. We'll just review the existing language and see what we want to alter. And we'll do that in a, on this call in a public forum so that everybody who's interested can see what we're doing. Okay, so unless there's any objection to that, we will move on. Okay, so we already kind of talked about new business. I don't think there's any new business at this point. Actually, there is one thing that I want to bring up, come to think of it. It's my item of new business. And that is that I know that in my neighborhood, we have had shootings, not with major weaponry, but with relatively high-powered air weapons. Our house, and the chief probably knows this, nobody else probably knows, Alexis probably knows this, but our house has been shot up by Highland students in the past, not that long ago. And at the time, the police showed up and the Highland students said, oh, we were just shooting at a target we missed. And we blew out Roy and Julie's front door, and whatever. But this happened at night. And what we found was essentially about 7 holes in our windows and in my truck window, which necessitated the replacement of my whole truck windshield. It was definitely over $1,000 worth of damage in total, but we didn't know that at that time. So basically nothing happened. By the way, over $1,000 worth of property damage is a felony, and discharging a firearm at a occupied dwelling is a crime. But it happened again, and it just happened with some neighbors who shot out and required the replacement of one of my neighbor's windows. And these, I don't know if these people are actually Highland students or not. The landlord there is a friend of ours, and they actually were given a 7-day eviction notice, which I asked them to do. So no charges were filed, no police report was filed. And the only reason no police report was filed is because my neighbor didn't want to file a police report, even though it was her property that was damaged. And I actually emailed her and I said, I don't understand your reluctance to do this. And actually, I don't. And that wasn't an attack on her. I just totally am baffled. And I even said that unless the police know these types of things are happening, if nobody reports these crimes, they can't see any pattern of activity. They don't know if anybody's getting burglarized or if their houses are being shot at or nothing if nobody reports it. So I think that as a matter of new business, I think that one of the things that I would like to think about is maybe some kind of an educational campaign in the future, once we get the authorization from the governing board, an education campaign about why it's important to report crimes to the police and how there's no threat to you by doing that. Because you can actually report crimes anonymously too, if you want to. So, but I think a lot of people don't understand these things. So I think an educational campaign, maybe over social media or on the police website or the city website, could be helpful and would assist our police department in actually knowing more about what's going on. Because I think a lot of crimes here are not reported unless they're really major crimes. And that's not good. So that's just something I wanted to suggest as new business. Again, we don't need to vote on it today. We can talk about it next meeting. But I think it's needed. And this neighbor is not the only person. I've run into probably, 60 people who refuse to report things to the police over the last 10 years. And I don't know why. For some reason, and it's not like these people are like part-time criminals. These are retired college professors and retired professionals and retired, even people with a background in law enforcement don't report things to our police department. So it's kind of shocking. But I think an educational campaign that it's safe to do this, it's important, it's valuable to the PD, and it's valuable to other citizens, and it's valuable to our entire city, might help turn that tide a little bit. So however we can figure out, we can discuss this later, how to do that educational campaign, I think it would be helpful. So any thoughts on what I just said?
I just have one question.
Yes.
Did this happen recently, or is this like...
It happened a week ago.
Did you file a report?
I did not, because my neighbor was adamant that she didn't want to have the police involved, and I don't know why.
But did you, when it happened to you, did you file a report? No?
When our house was shot up? Oh yeah, definitely.
When did that happen? A week ago too?
Our place was shut up. I don't know. Actually, Kimberly knows about it. It was probably about 2 years ago.
Oh, okay.
So,
And their alibi was that they were doing target practice at night.
I remember.
at our
Who
house.
does target practice in the dark?
Well, here's the thing. I'm just going to say this to illustrate what this feels like. We heard all these bangs on our windows because you know what it's like when a window gets shot and you're inside of a closed space. It's very, very loud. It sounds like a little bomb going off. So I looked out our front glass windows, which have like this little design so you can actually look out. And what I see is a silhouette of a guy across the street on the porch holding a handgun, aiming it right at me, and he pulled the trigger and the whole window shattered right in front of my face.
Oh, man.
So when I reported this, nothing happened. And as Kimberly knows, I actually brought it up with the Highlands PD with Sam Minner. So, but the point is, I don't want to focus on that specific incident too much, but I think that when things like this happen, it's really important that the PD knows, regardless of whatever the legal outcome is for the perpetrators. The police need to know, and it needs to go on record. Otherwise, they don't know if there's a pattern of kids going around shooting out windows all over town if nobody reports it. And windows are expensive. Okay, they're very expensive. And the windows that got shot out in our neighbor's place are dual pane glass, which are even more expensive. They're like $400 a piece. Right. So, so I think that, and there's been many, many, many other instances where neighbors refuse to report something to the police, and they adamantly refuse. Like, no, I don't want to go to the police. And it's like, why? I mean, are you hiding something? Or, are you on the run from the feds? Like, what's wrong with you? And they don't do it unless I really encourage them. And in some cases, I've actually gone into the police station with them so they can file a report. So that's what I mean by, I think, an educational program would help, because people shouldn't fear doing that. That's what the police is for. They're here to protect and serve, and that's what they do. And when you need them, we depend on them. And I think having that relationship with the police department, between the community and the police, and that trust that you can go in the police department, file a report, and it's totally normal and it's fine. That I think is the bedrock of police community relations.
So I think that I don't think we would have to wait for council to give us approval. And that's the reason why is because I have on the newsletter, on the city newsletter, I have a corner there that we could provide that information to them.
Okay, yeah, I think everything.
To, write something up or us collaborate together to do an excerpt of something in reference to why to report a crime, or why are these crimes need to be reported, or any crime. We're trying to put our police department out there more, show our community that we do care about them, that we're committed to public safety. And, we want to be able to work with them more and show them that we are the guardians and the protectors of our community.
Well, what we can do is I think that's a great idea to post it on your site, but maybe we can also, once we figure out what language to use and how to describe, how important this is, maybe we can also post it on the city website. Maybe, Lee, you can talk to Virginia Marujo again and figure out, where we can get this information out. I'm sorry, Dr. Bloody, raise your hand. I think you're muted.
I was muted on my headset. Thank you. I just want to mention that I think it's important that we recognize that we want things to change. The chief, wants to do more community policing and set the standard by which his officers rise, right? In which they're out, more engaged with the community. But at the same time, and that in itself, let me back up and say that in itself will help build trust and rapport with the police department in order for people to feel comfortable to, report crimes and whatnot to the police. At the same time, members of the community will also have to, in essence, understand and know that there's good intentions out there by law enforcement, and they can't in turn address this type of behavior within the city of Las Vegas if it's not being reported to them. So in essence, we're in a catch-22, and so whatever communication is set out whatever campaign, whether it be, social media campaign, communication through the newsletter, as Chief Crispin mentioned. I think that those are important aspects to consider, in which, recognizing where different parties or entities come from, and how do we identify communication that's, honoring and recognizing their hesitations, and us wanting to ensure that, law enforcement are responding and, addressing that crime so it's not being repeated, but they have to know it's happening, right? So just keep that in mind is my recommendation when we look at what type of communication is going out to the community. And also, I'll just add that it's going to definitely be a process and taking time. When we look at changes in environment and people's behavior, that's not, change that happens overnight. It's change that takes time. And I think, the survey is a great step towards that, and demonstrating to the community that we want to know what their, the police department wants to know what their perceptions are, what are their interactions like. And so I just wanted to make that comment as it relates to unreported crime and the hesitancy that exists, and how we communicate out proactively about that.
Yeah, I agree with that, Kimberly. And I think maybe this is something we could consider adding to the survey. Literally a simple question that says, if you were the victim of a minor crime, then put an example, vandalism, something like that. Would you report it to the police? I'd be really curious how many people say yes or no. And if no, why? Maybe there's a text field that says why. I don't want to get involved. I don't trust the police. There might be retaliation. Whatever the reason is, it would be good to know, because then we can address this in communication.
So I don't know if everybody's downloaded the My Civic 311. If you go into My Civic 311 and you go to Las Vegas Police Department, you'll have citizens complaint, emergency 911, noise concerns, parking concerns. We're going to be adding some more modules in there for that, such as vandalism, where they want to be remain anonymous or actually file a report with us. So there's different ways, there's going to be different ways of being able to file a report and report a crime moving forward. We deal with animal control issues every day now. Right here on Animal Control Division, I think we've had 5 for today that come directly to us on My Civic 311. And there's others, right? All the potholes, you can pay your bill on this. There's just so many things that the city has opened up for our community, so they have that ease of being able to pay your bill online instead of going to the city to pay it or to the water. So there is a lot of other modules that we want to open up on the My Civic 311, and we'll be working with Virginia on that.
Okay, no, that sounds fantastic. Yeah, it's a great channel for communication. Speaking of which, Chief, we're kind of running, it's 4:33, so we should probably wrap this up soon. But Chief, does the Crime Stoppers Network, is it still active in this town?
So Crime Stoppers is not, I have not heard from anybody from Crime Stoppers, but we do have a Crime Stopper line here at the police department. It's called the Drug Tip Hotline. So that number is going to be 505, correct me if I'm wrong, Alexis, 505-425-8884, I believe. Is that correct? We used to have that when I was first here. But I think that's what it is that rings to our dispatch. It's going under construction right now. Some things were some infrastructure in the building was moved, so they're trying to reconnect it. So right now, all you're doing is getting a ringtone. But hopefully by next week we can fix that. But okay. We also can report crime to the 7504, and if it's happening right now, or don't forget you have your emergency 911. If it's in progress, you have your 911. So there's ways to reach out to our police department.
So the 8884 number, somebody could report any kind of crime there, like if somebody threw a rock through their window or public or something like that.
Any type, yeah. But we just want to make sure that we have those numbers, plus My Civic 311. You can report a crime there.
Okay, but the 8884 is specifically for an anonymous
Yes.
reporting. Okay, good. That's great. All right, that's helpful. Okay, I don't think we have any other new business right now. So since Pat is on the line, Pat, do you have any community updates for us?
Yes, I just had a few really quick things. I know this meeting was really long, and I appreciate you allowing me to speak. I think what I do have to say might be helpful. That's okay?
Absolutely.
The first thing is there was no way to know how to give public input for this meeting. So if you could, in future announcements, put on there how folks can give public input, like the city council has steps you take, where you send your email, by what time, that sort of thing. So if this commission could also have that information, that would be really helpful. My next suggestion is that in addition to you posting this on the city's website, that you consider posting it in the paper of record or in the Optic. There's a lot of people that were not able to find it when I told them it would be posted on the city's website, and it just seems we have another commission that was formed the same day as this one, and they are posting it in the Optic. So I think it would be helpful. It would reach more people to be aware that your meetings were happening.
Just one quick question, and actually, both you and Lee probably know the answer already. But when you post something in the Optic, are we posting the entire? I mean, obviously, we'd be posting the meeting notice, but do we post the entire agenda and all documents related to it? Like, because we're talking about certain documents that we might want to review that the public should have be able to access and read also.
You can just post the link.
Okay, Lee. Oh, your microphone's off, Lee.
You couldn't possibly. If you've seen some of the city council agendas with attachments, I've had issues uploading them to the website when I was working for the city because literally it's like 1,000 pages and it would blow up the content management. So where the city typically is going to post notice like that would be if it's was this the Youth Advisory Commission by chance, Pat?
Yes.
Okay. They were going outside of their regular meetings, as memory serves, and they had to post. When we have meetings of bodies that are within the annual Open Meetings Act resolution, where it says, second and fourth Wednesdays, we're going to be there. That doesn't get posted in the Optic, and it doesn't get posted not only because it's a process to get it into the Optic, but also because the city has to pay for that.
Well, maybe one sort of an in-between thing that might be helpful, Pat and Lee, is to periodically post something in the Optic that just reminds people that the police commission meetings are on the third Thursday of every month at this time, and that if you're interested in attending, here's how you attend, and then have a link in there which would have information about this, the Google Meet ID or the Zoom ID or whatever. That way, at least people are reminded. I mean, do you think that would be a reasonable thing to do? And do we have a budget to do that? Sorry, that's a two-part question. So Lee, Pat, maybe you can answer that first, and then Lee can chime in too.
I would just say you should read your bylaws. It's laid out in there. The Youth Commission was required to read the bylaws prior to their first meeting. And there's so much detail in there that you all were suffering through during this meeting that I couldn't believe. It's all laid out. Don't even wait for the charter stuff to get settled. All your guidance is in those bylaws, and you'll know that each other read them when they tell you about the typo that's in there. So I would encourage you to read the bylaws thoroughly prior to the next meeting. It's going to make I think your future meetings a lot easier, including decisions on informing people about your meeting. And
Okay, yeah. And I think Chief is going to send those out to us so we can all review those before the next
that would be
meeting. Yeah.
And I have no idea what the city's budget is for publication in the optic. We may have a hard sell that'd have to go through the city clerk.
Well, I guess even if we had a small announcement that just reminded people when the meetings were and how to get information.
I wonder if we could get it in Cape Pasa.
Well, possibly.
And then the fourth of 5 things that I wanted to bring up, if that's okay, has to do with the name of this group. It actually, you do have your name. It's in the bylaws. And it's our understanding with the other commission that if we want to change that name, we'd have to go through the whole process that's required for changing bylaws. So just to be aware of that, I know the certificate you all got doesn't match what the city website calls you. So it might just be confusing for people until you can settle on, one name that matches on all the documents. And then the 5th thing has to do with why people don't report crimes. And I can just briefly tell you, as someone who myself has been hesitant, and as someone who has tried to talk others into reporting crimes here, there are many reasons, including retaliation. It's huge in this town. As the chief knows, I myself have been a victim of retaliatory crime for reporting a crime, as have other people that I know. It's a very real issue. So please leave space for those people in our community who have that legitimate fear. Another thing is that the Crime Stoppers line that you call that goes to the city PD is not anonymous. And the community knows that. They know that their number shows up. They know that it goes to a general number at the city. And when they leave their message or talk to a live person, they know that person knows who they are. So we were working some years back to try and get that to be anonymous, and we didn't have any luck. So that's something you might want to consider down the road. Another reason that some people don't, including my neighbors, is that we all were victims of a crime last year, and we called the police, and it was a significant thing that happened, and they still discouraged us from filing a report because we had no proof of who did it. It was mind-blowing that we all stood in the alley and heard the police try and say, you really don't want to file a report. You don't even know who did it. You don't have any video footage. And so we were stunned by that. So there's multiple reasons and many more, I'm sure. So please just keep an open mind about all of that. Thank you very much.
Ms. Lehan, I'd like to address that. I don't know if I was already in command at the time. I believe one of them was. Maybe you can give me a call and we can address the Crime Stopper line also to let you know what we're doing.
Well, maybe that's something this commission could help you. I mean, you're already overworked. This could be something they could help with, right? I mean,
yeah, the Crime Stopper line it's not a recorded line. I could assure you with that.
I know. I know everything about it, so that's okay. You've already had such a long meeting, and I don't need to take any more of your time. I just wanted to give you that little bit of input.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you feel free, you can contact me at any time, and we can discuss some of these issues that you brought up.
Great. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Definitely. Thanks for your input, Pat. That's extremely helpful. I think that, in terms of the educational thing, people should also know that if you feel like you've been unfairly treated by a police officer, you can actually file a complaint. So, and there's a complaint form that exists. Nobody fills them out. So, and that would actually be helpful for the.
And Roy, actually, I don't know where those complaint forms reside now, but some years ago, people came to the Peace and Justice Center and said the only place to get a complaint form is in the police department itself. And the person was actually assaulted by an officer sexually, is what the claim was, and felt very uncomfortable going into the very department where that person works. And so we were working for a while to try and get those forms available at the library and some other places so folks wouldn't actually have to go into the police department do that. Now, I don't know where that stands now or how people can access that. My information is a few years old. Thank you.
Okay.
So,
Well,
so right now, the citizens complaint forms are still here at the police department. When they do pick up a citizen's complaint form, they're making a complaint against our officers, and our policy states that they will put their signature, their name on that complaint, so we could investigate it. If it's accommodation, the same thing. I mean, it really hasn't changed in 25 years since the complaint form. So, if we can work with anybody, for our citizens complaint forms, if again, Roy, you're the liaison to be able to, if someone wants to file a complaint, you've brought them here and done a complaint, and we investigate that complaint. That's why we have an internal affairs investigator. That's why we investigate, so we really want to be able to work with the community, and if they are afraid to come here to get one, we need to work on that, right? We as a department need to let them know that it's a safe area for you to come and work, get that citizens complaint form or accommodation form, and how can you be afraid to come to the police department? You shouldn't have to.
Yeah, well, maybe we can work on that. Maybe it's a matter of having the forms more widely distributed, like Pat said, in libraries or somewhere else. And then if somebody's really afraid to walk in there and bring it in, I mean, this is a liaison area for us. I mean, somebody could contact Lee or me or somebody and say, I really don't want to walk in there and hand this in because it's a pretty serious crime against a police officer. I could walk it in, or somebody else can walk it in, as long as it's filled out and signed. So, I mean, that we might want to put our thinking caps on and come up with an effective, creative, simple way to do that. So if somebody's actually scared to come in, they can still file a complaint.
So again, I was trying to work on putting this on my Civic 311 also.
Yeah, right. That would be great.
And on our website.
Yeah. So, Kimberly.
Yeah, I definitely hear the concerns that Pat raised in understanding why somebody may not want to physically go in to do a complaint. I think it's also important to know and understand that if an officer is being alleged of something, misconduct or whatever it might be, they also have due process rights. And that's why it's important that the person who is making the allegations signs to that. In case, you all were not aware of it, but I believe, Chief, that is the reason why someone has to sign to it that they are alleging this. It can't be done anonymously, right?
Correct. We were investigating multiple anonymous complaints, and now we want to be able to make contact with that complainant and figure out what happened with that officer, or if it has to go after the inquiry, does it go to internal affairs, does it go do we write a letter to that complainant? So there's steps that we take. It's not just comes in and sits on my desk. No, it doesn't. We take all complaints seriously. What we're trying to do is be transparent, right? We have to share the good, the bad, and the ugly of our police department in any way. And so we just, we ask that if you do have a complaint, come in and file a complaint. Meet with one of my commanders or my major or my deputy chief. You don't have to meet, and we forward it to the internal affairs and they do the inquiry. And if it comes to founded and we have to do another internal investigations, then the investigation begins.
Yeah.
And if it turns criminal, then it turns criminal.
Yeah. Sorry, Chief. Go ahead.
I think that we're trying to, again, right, change our culture of our department, and I don't, our officers are young, they're learning from our seasoned officers on, of course, how to talk themselves out of a police report, how to, the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? You find it, you put it in your toolbox, and that's what they see out there sometimes. So we're trying to change that also. Our seasoned officers are good. They're great officers. Our young officers are great officers. They're out there doing their job to the best of their ability. They might lack some training in some type of crimes that they go to, but as we look at it, we have to work with them.
Yeah, just two real quick things I'll say is that, I've actually complained about police officer behavior more than once. And, there's another way to do it, which is if you know the chief or if you have a good relationship with the police department, a commander or somebody like that, you can just sit down and have a meeting. I mean, none of these were like serious crimes or serious complaints. I never filled out an actual complaint form. There was no internal investigation. It was just like, this happened, and does this need to happen again? and I got to say that all of the things that I brought to the police department were actually acted on, and things changed. So I do appreciate that a lot. And the last thing I'll say is just to put a face on the internal investigations. I know that somebody that all of us knows, and that's former DC Kenneth Jenkins, used to run the internal investigations. So he's like a real person. He lives here. These are real human beings. So I think that it's not like when the chief says, oh, we have internal investigations, that's some mysterious thing that doesn't really exist. It exists, and they're real people, and you run into them at Walmart. And so, I know these programs work, and anything we can do to encourage people to file a complaint if they really believe it's necessary. I know that this police department will take these complaints seriously because they've taken my complaints seriously. And that's, as a citizen, that's one reason I'm here, because I totally appreciate that. So, but again, that can go into some of our educational materials that we post somewhere. And we'll figure that out. But yeah, Pat, I appreciate all your comments, and these are all things that we should be aware of and act on as much as, whether it's this committee or the PD itself, we will act on these things.
It's really hard to have this conversation, but I'm going to say, please consider that the life experience in this community of some of our community members may be radically different from yours, and people in this community have a long memory. There have been bad things that have happened to people, and there have been people in this community who were on the victim end who had no voice. And I'm just, I'm not shaking my finger at the police force or anything else, but I am saying, realize that when people are afraid to come forward, there may be really valid reasons for that. And your perception being much, much different may be the result of your life experience being much, much different.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And I think we need to be cognizant of that and be creative in how we create, how we make avenues for people to feel comfortable, whether it's just reporting a crime or complaining to the police about police behavior or whatever. I think citizens, anything we can do to create that kind of a comfort zone so that people actually do these things will be helpful. And I don't project my life experience on. I've had a lot of bad experiences myself, not necessarily with the police, but just in general. I mean, I've been shot at, I've been stabbed. I mean, it's like, and so I totally get that. But on the other hand, this is our community, this is our police department, these are our fellow citizens. So anything we can do as a group to help all of this dialogue, the better. And I think that's what the chief is trying to achieve anyway, is better community policing and a better relationship. So having these discussions is important. And I think the more creative and helpful we can be in all directions, the better. I mean, that's our job, even if it doesn't say it in the city charter, that really is part of our, the reason we exist as a group. So anyway, okay, well, I think we should probably call the meeting. We're coming up here on it's 4:54. So I thank all of you for being here. And I think we covered some good information. We'll actually start to maybe take some small actions, at least on the survey by next meeting. So Alexis, if you need anything from us in order to get the agenda up for a meeting a month from now, be sure to let us know. And if anybody has any input into agenda items, make sure you get that to Alexis ahead of time. In the meantime, for OMA, refrain from talking about any of this business between ourselves between now and then. Would someone like to move to adjourn the meeting?
I move that we adjourn.
Second.
Okay, Kimberly seconds. Lee moves. All right. Thank you very much. I think we discussed some good things. So,
Do the ayes have it?
I'm sorry? The ayes have it. The ayes have it. Well, I don't know. I have 4 eyes. Does that count? That's what I used to be called in elementary school. That's why I've been in so many fights, right? Anyway. Yeah, so thank you all very much. And the meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good week.
Okay, bye-bye.
Good night.